So my first question for you this morning is, what is your name, and then what did you major in at ASU?
Okay, great questions. Well, my name is Ryan Alcorn. I got sorry, I'm just adjusting my windows here. I got a
Okay,
bachelor of arts from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and I have a classics minor.
perfect. And then what year did you graduate?
Um, I have to think about it. 2011.
Perfect. Okay. My next question is just gonna kind of get more into like the longs of like what you do for work. And then we'll just kind of go from there. So what exactly is your current job position?
Sure. I am a senior deputy county attorney for the Gila County Attorney's Office. Obviously, I'm a lawyer, so I went to law school after getting my degree in philosophy.
Mhm.
I'm a prosecutor. I prosecute high-level felony crimes in Gila County in the state of Arizona.
Perfect. And then, how did you know that you kind of wanted to get into prosecution, or did you just kind of want to be a lawyer and then look more into criminal law, or is this something like you always just wanted to do?
Um, I don't know. I have kind of a weird career path, I guess. When I got my degree in philosophy, I was already it was 2011. So we had sort of just gone through the 2008 housing crisis. Um, like a lot of people, I was going through post-secondary education, and it's very expensive. And so the question is how do you translate this into a means of living? Um, and philosophy is all about, at least the degree portion of it is all about taking a position and defending that position. So law school just seemed like an easy fit. So I didn't really give it much thought. It wasn't like I have to be a lawyer, or even really I want to be a lawyer. It was just sort of, that was how, at the time, I was really into the philosophy side of things, and that was how I translated that into something that um, I could turn into a career. And so that's just sort of the path that I went. And then when I got to law school, I don't know how I fell into criminal law. It's just sort of something that happened. I can't even say it was like your basic criminal law course that got me there, because it really wasn't. It was just sort of that was just sort of the thing. And I guess again it goes back to that's how you argue things, right? I mean,
Mm.
what I do, I'm in court all the time. I'm arguing with defense counsel all the time. I'm not a transactional lawyer. I don't do contracts. I don't do I don't do corporate law. I don't do any of that. I don't do patents. I just argue with people. That's my
Mhm.
job. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that answer. I know me and a lot of other students like me kind of went through a very similar like process where instead of like the housing crisis and then the recession of 2008, we had COVID. And that's been kind of an adjustment where like the world kind of shut down for a little bit, and like being a high school student transitioning into college, like it was, it's definitely really weird to try and navigate that and really like critically think about like my career path and like what I can not only do to like make me happy, but what I can do to like sustain myself. So like really appreciate your answer. Makes me feel better knowing that other people also went through it. And it's
well,
not just me.
and my thing is always, I don't think this works for everyone. I think some people they know very well what they want, and they can establish very clear goals, and it's just sort of a step-by-step process.
Mhm,
That's really not the way my life has turned out. Everything that I do, I just make myself open to take opportunities when they come. And that's literally all I've done my entire life, is just, when opportunities come along, I'm available to take them or not, depending on my life situation. I've um, never really had a specific goal and then gone for it. It's just sort of
mhm,
like, what is available to me, what are the paths that are open, and being open and willing to take one, to commit to something. And if it doesn't make you happy, to make another decision.
mhm. Absolutely. My next question for you is, how does your philosophy degree and then your understanding of philosophy help you like every day with arguing in court? just kind of being a lawyer? Like, how does it guide your understanding of like what you do with your current position?
So I'm a public servant technically,
Mm,
because I work for an elected official, and my thought process on that is, the public has a very hard time understanding like what I do, or like what, especially what a defense attorney does.
mhm,
There's often a lot of questions of like, well, that person did something really awful. How is it that you can, how is it that you can justify raising a defense for them? How is it that you can, justify doing all these things? And the answer, sometimes the answer is well, it's my job. That person is a representation, and
mhm,
even though I don't agree with what they did, and I think they did it or whatever, I still have a responsibility to ensure that their rights are being protected.
mhm,
Sometimes that's the answer. But I think there's a different answer that can come out of the philosophy degree, and it's something that the public really doesn't understand, which is that the law very often, you separate a lot of facts, or you put the law or your case or your situation in a vacuum, where sure, there's a lot of extraneous facts that may apply to your case. For example, if I were to present a felony case to the jury never gets to hear about a defendant's prior felony convictions. So, someone that may have gone out and committed 10 prior felonies in the last 10 years, you'd think that would be relevant to the 11th prosecution, but it really isn't, because it has to be seen in a vacuum. And that's something that you do in law school, but I had no problems with that in law school because I was already doing that with the philosophy degree.
mhm,
A lot of times you're considering a position in a vacuum. Philosophers love to use a tool, where they have this theory about something or this position on something, and then in order to argue for it or argue against it, they'll come up with this. There's a hypothetical universe in which this is the thing. The thing that's coming to my mind is there's a hypothetical universe in which the only thing that exists is a pond, and there's a frog in the pond, and it's just like, it's very ridiculous things, in order to test this very like specific niche issue. Um, and so I find that it really helps to kind of shut out all the things that aren't relevant to my case, or aren't relevant to the argument, and it's easy to, my brain is sort of structured by way of education to put things into a box and sort of not consider anything outside of that box, because that's what we have to do for this. I think society kind of puts an emphasis on thinking outside of the box, but when you're sort of in the legal world, that's really just not possible.
awesome. Yeah, no, that's a really good answer, and I feel like a lot of people don't really understand that about law too, so, like, it's really nice to, like, have that insight, especially from someone who does it, like, so often.
Yeah,
Um
I'll give you a great, but maybe controversial example is, uh, the recent sort of like Roe v. Wade overturning. I disagree with, like, let's say, the tone of the opinion, but legally I agree with the outcome, because and people kind of struggle with that sort of conception, like,
Mhm,
well, how could you be okay with this sort of opinion, or there are folks on the other side who are like,
mhm,
yeah, I agree with you, but like, I have friends who are like, how could you possibly be in agreement with this? And
mhm,
the way I explain it is constitutionally it's very sound, because the original Roe v. Wade decision, the Supreme Court created essentially a method of examining cases when presidential power is okay, or when, essentially, when the legislature does either says something about an issue, doesn't say, is silent about an issue, or specifically disagrees with an issue. They created this whole structure on how to examine these cases that doesn't exist in the Constitution, that wasn't, it's not something that, it's not a power that was granted to them by congressional. And so really the basis of the overturning of Roe v. Wade is, we had this opinion back then, it created this doctrine, but we never had the power to create that doctrine in the first place. You'll notice none of that is about women's rights. None of that is actually about the issue. It's about constitutional power. And
mhm.
so in that sense, I disagree, even though I might disagree, or in that sense, I agree, even though I might disagree with the tone or method of the opinion.
That's a really wonderful example. My next question for you would be, what is one class that you've taken here at ASU that has really impacted you, or maybe that you still like think about to this day?
Oh, that's very easy. And I don't even know if I want to talk about this because it's sort of negative, but not really. I took so one of my last semesters on my philosophy degree, I took a class on a philosophical concept called normative uncertainty. Do you have any idea what that is?
I actually don't.
Okay. A normative fact, it's a philosophical term. A normative fact is a fact about well, fact is maybe the wrong word. A normative statement is a statement about something that you should do or you ought to do. For example, I should brush my teeth every day. That is a normative statement because it's not necessarily true or false. I think everyone would probably think that's true, but it's not necessarily true or false. It's about something I should do or I ought to do. I have some kind of imperative to do. Maybe it's moral to do. So that's what a normative thing is. Now, normative uncertainty is where you don't know what to do. And so I took this class on normative, it's actually just on uncertainty. I don't remember what the class is called, but it was like a PhD level philosophy course, and I was just doing this for my BA, and so uncertainty is this like philosophical issue that really like killed ethics for me, because I don't think that there's really any ethical system that's out there that can or adequately addresses uncertainty, which is to say, like, any system of ethics is gonna tell you how to determine what to do, essentially like how to be a good person. Any ethical system strives to tell you how to achieve happiness, how to maximize utility, how to promote respect for human beings because they're human beings. A Kantian system. Any ethical system is going to do that, but none of them really adequately address how do I know what to do when I don't know what to do. So for example, I think utilitarianism suffers from this the most. For example, let's give like a very extreme argument, a sort of popular argument, right? If you could go back in time and kill Hitler before the genocide happened, is that a good action or a bad action? Is that something that you should do? And utilitarianism will say, well, most certainly, right? I mean, you maximize utility because he caused all this suffering, and so if you eliminate that suffering, necessarily there's a huge increase in happiness, because all those people get to live their natural lives and so on and so forth. But normative uncertainty comes in and says, well, how do you know that action doesn't lead to something more horrific that was avoided, and this is actually the lesser of two? And the answer is you don't know, and you can't know. And so there's like this real epistemological issue with that ethical systems telling you this is how you be a good person, but how do you be a good person when you don't know? There's sort of this knowledge gap, and I've never gotten over that. I've never found an answer. I've never I don't really read literature, so I'm sure plenty of postgraduates and people who are actually in the field professionally, not doing what I do. I guess you could call what I do hedge philosophy or armchair philosophy. But I'm sure some people have taken a stab at it, but I've never seen an argument that adequately addresses uncertainty, and it kind of ruined ethics for me. And I think about that all the time.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand that. And like, I know there's like a lot of classes where like people think of the impact only being positive, but like classes can really help you think critically and really make you think, especially after taking that. And sometimes, it does get into like thinking about it and thinking, okay, well, like, why did no one bring this up to me? And like, how did this kind of, affect how I see things now? So I really appreciate the answer. It was really honest.
Yeah.
A lot of people think of like the impact of classes and they naturally just go straight to, oh, well, this is my favorite class. I'm like, I like the professor. So like that was my impact, rather than like really critically like thinking about like the impact that it had on them. So I really appreciate the answer.
Yeah.
I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but like as a college freshman, did you have like something that you wanted to do like when you grew up, or like did you have like a career path that you were really interested in like maybe exploring?
Yeah, and I really didn't. And I'm sort of, I guess, a non-traditional student in a way. I didn't follow, ASU has this sort of path for incoming people who come into ASU, and you're, at least at that time, I don't know if it still is the case, but you're required to spend a certain amount of time on campus, and you got to take these
Yeah.
college life classes and this and that. And I never did any of that. And the reason why is because none of that actually applies to a transfer student. And technically, I was a transfer student. In high school, I was dual enrolled in community
Mhm.
college, and then I took another year of community college, and then went and transferred my community college credit hours into ASU. And so I never actually did the sort of like college life thing, which is probably a good thing for me, but that's beside the point. So I'm sort of a non-traditional student, I guess. But no, I don't I can't say I ever really had like a clear vision or like a this is what I wanted to do. I just sort of what I liked doing, and I just sort of kind of fell into it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And, it's always
Classics, for
important,
example. Classics, for example. I took one Latin course.
Mhm.
I don't know why I took it. I'm not sure. Maybe it was a language requirement or something.
Mhm.
But I took like one Latin course, like first semester Latin, and I just loved it. And so I took, 6 more after that and got a minor in it, but just because I
Mhm.
liked it, not for any other particular reason.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a really big thing of college too. That's actually how I picked up my minor. I took one class for it and I was like, this is so interesting. Like, I want to continue to learn about this. And I got the advice actually from my mother. She was like, well, if you're going to do it, like, you might as well, have a piece of paper that says that you did it.
You did it.
You know,
Yeah, right.
yeah. So, like, it's definitely really awesome, like, exploring, like, what you love to learn and, like, going through and like just kind of finding stuff that you really love and what you don't love to learn about in college. Both are super important. My next question for you, is there a professor that you've had, maybe like a philosophy professor, that has kind of impacted you or inspired you, just kind of like in your way of thinking?
Hmm. Um, it's been a while, so I have a
Mhm,
hard time like remembering names and faces. I can't say that
mhm,
there's any particular one. Um, there was a philosophy professor that I took several courses from, but just
mhm,
because he taught the ones that I was taking, um not because I was like following him or anything.
mhm,
We did not agree particularly on things.
mhm,
He stands out kind of clearly in my head. We didn't agree on certain philosophical issues. He's a big like psychological philosophy guy and sort of
mhm,
uh, mind reductionist. Essentially, the mind reduces to the brain. I'm very not that.
mhm,
So we had like really like large philosophical gaps. So I distinctly remember like very much not agreeing with his position on things. Nonetheless, he put on a good course and put on the
mhm,
adequate. I took several things. I think I took like philosophy of the mind from him, and then he had like a philosophy of language class, I think, that I remember taking. Um, there was we're not necessarily here to talk about my classics minor because that doesn't
mhm,
necessarily fall under the umbrella of liberal arts and sciences, but there was a classics professor. um, Later on in the minor, you take some like 400 level courses,
mhm,
and she would pick out like specific books and do surveys. If I remember correctly, she was Italian, but she was very, very knowledgeable on
mhm,
like the high level Latin stuff. Like you'd get into this obscure passage in the Aeneid, and she'd be like, "Well, this is what Virgil is talking about because it's a callback
mhm,
to this other work where the author wrote this like similar thing," and so he's like reminding, and it was just like she knew all the pieces and like a lot of etymology of things, and so it was more than just like read the book, translate the book, understand, the things that we wrote were written in a kind of meter. So like understand the meter. It was more than that. It was really more of like a true understanding of the work. And I always appreciated that. She was kind of elderly then. I'm not even sure if she's still teaching or even deceased maybe, but
Mhm.
I remember her a lot.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Classics are still doing well at ASU. I've taken a classics class before. Yeah. So
I was
very
really
similar methodology.
I was very friendly. I was a lot more involved with the classics faculty than I was the
Mhm,
philosophy faculty. I think the
mhm,
philosophy professors are a little hard to approach. But
mhm.
the classics professors, if they're still the same people, they're all really cool. So
Absolutely. My next question for you, were you a part of any like research opportunities or any internships, or did you work any jobs at ASU?
not while I was in not while I was in undergrad. No, I did while I was in law school, but not during undergrad. In fact, I hardly worked at all. Fortunately, I stayed with my parents and they were able to support me. So
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. And like a lot of kids don't end up doing like internships or researches. I'm one of the lucky few who found a job at ASU, and I'm doing it like within what I study. So like, I don't know. It's like nice to have like the experience of like the people who do it and like the people who don't do it. Because I didn't come in doing this, so it's kind of nice
absolutely.
to like hear about other people's opportunities with it.
Yeah, and like I said, I did that in law school. And I could talk about that if you like. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's okay. I
absolutely.
really enjoy talking. So yeah, no, I worked for like two or three. Well, law school is kind of all about doing that kind of practical work,
Yeah.
especially at ASU. There's a big
Mhm,
focus on practical application. And so every summer I did various things like I did a prosecution clinic. So I worked for the city of
mhm,
Mesa prosecutor's office. I worked for Maricopa County Attorney's Office twice while I was there. But on the ASU side, I helped part time in the admissions office.
mhm,
So I got to know a lot of like um, people in classes who were after me by virtue of the fact that they would call or I would be calling them
mhm,
to talk to them about like being admitted to law school. So I did that kind of stuff.
mhm,
And I got really familiar with the admissions staff as well. So
mhm. Yeah, I actually do something really similar. For undergrad, I'm in Barrett and we give like tours as a club. So I do that and like I got to really know like the admissions people and like the recruitment team super well, which has been like super wonderful. And it's a really good opportunity to kind of like learn more about like the ASU that I don't really know. Cause
yeah,
like when you go through the admissions process, it looks a lot different than like helping students like understand like Barrett and ASU and kind of showing them it. So it's
yeah,
been really awesome to be able to see both. All right, my next question for you. If you could teach any class, what would it be?
um, yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in again, the answer is law school. Maybe I bet I could. There's some philosophy courses I could hack, but there's not anything that I'm particularly interested, except for maybe um, I said this earlier, epistemology. That's specifically like the philosophy of knowledge, like how you know things, kind of a broad category of philosophical topics. Um, so I'm sure I could do one of those, but I'm not particularly interested. Same thing with classics, like um, teaching others how to learn Latin might be fun. I'm not sure I understand it well enough for that either, but there's a I really enjoy what I do for work, and I've often thought about teaching. I took a couple of courses from a federal public defender while I was at ASU Law by the name of John Sands, and I don't know if he still teaches those or not. He was public defender, so obviously there was sort of an ideological difference there. But the classes were really good. And they were really helpful and informative on like actual practical things. And I'd like to do that as well, but like from the prosecution side. Um,
Absolutely.
And I've looked into it. Unfortunately, ASU law makes you pay to come be an adjunct, and I'm just not about that. So
I didn't know
uh,
that.
yeah, there's like a $3,000 fee to come be an adjunct.
Mhm.
And essentially what you're paying for is like parking and using facilities, because you get access to the gyms and the showers and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and things that I'm really not interested in, but
Mhm.
nonetheless, there are overhead costs. I think there's probably support staff involved.
Mhm.
Um, so I'd love to volunteer, but I'm certainly not going to come pay to teach a course. So
I get you. Yeah, I'm glad you put some thought into that, you know. I'm an undergrad still. I think about it while I'm, like, still pursuing my undergrad degree, like, if I could teach a class, what would I teach? So, like, it's definitely a really fun, like, thought to kinda just, you know, get into.
yeah.
Um, my next question for you, what advice do you have for, like, current students?
Wow. Okay. So I've done a couple of these things with not this particularly, but I've done
Mhm,
like panels and stuff for the law school before, and my
mhm,
answers have sort of changed over the years, but they're still sort of basic.
mhm,
Um, I was one of those folks that went to class all the time. Well, that's not true. In undergrad, I skipped a lot more class, but I skipped class for bad reasons, not for good reasons. But I would skip more class unless your professor has like a strict attendance policy, which
mhm,
yeah happens from time to time. But I would skip more class, and the reason why is because other than like learning how to think about things, I can't say that I learned anything particularly. It's hard to like put what I'm trying to say into words, but
mhm,
I wish I had skipped more class in order to pursue more professional opportunities. Essentially,
mhm,
if you're skipping class to network, if you're skipping class to do something in your career field or something that you love, that's a valid reason to skip class. And I think there's this pressure to go to class and learn from a professor. But you don't necessarily get. I mean, if you're one of those students that has to get it by listening to it or by seeing it in action, that's one thing. But what's the real value in going to the Wednesday class, 10:30 to noon, to sit there on your laptop and browse Twitter while someone like talks at you, right? I mean, what's
mhm,
really the value there? What are you really getting out of your money? And the answer is probably nothing. And so I wish even in law school I'd skipped more class to go pursue more professional
mhm,
opportunities, not to just, screw around, right?
mhm,
So that's kind of out there. I touched on this earlier again, like I live my life just being available to take opportunities when they come. I think a lot of people, and again, this doesn't work for everyone, but I think a lot of people get pigeonholed into what they think their life ought to look like,
mhm,
or what they want it to look like. And the problem with that is you get there, sometimes you get there and you find out that it wasn't what you thought, or you made it something in your mind that it isn't. And I think if you just make yourself available to opportunities and you have an open mind to take them when they come, um, things end up working out. Things have a way of working out, and sometimes they don't. I mean, people, I don't want to say luck, but sometimes bad
mhm,
things happen to people, um, and that's sort of unavoidable. But I think if you make yourself available for opportunities, even the ones that you didn't think you would be willing to take, um, you're just a lot happier that way.
mhm,
And that's just kind of like my perspective. Um, there's also this sort of like when you're in the moment, like you're in your program now, um but eventually you're going to be like 10 years down the road, and it's just such a blip in your life, and it was so important at the moment, and you look back on it and it just really wasn't that important. I mean, I think we all have that experience with high school, right? Like everything in
mhm.
high school is like mission critical, and then someday you realize that you don't talk to any of those people and none of that actually mattered at all. And so, I don't know. I'm just kind of, it seems probably pretty obvious talking to me, but I'm a pretty laid back guy. And so just maybe don't take it so seriously. Um, just kind of experience life and enjoy it while you're in the moment to as best you can.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And then my last thing for you, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Anything else you'd like to talk about?
Oh, I could go on forever. I love what I do, and maybe that's
Mhm,
important too. Find something you love to do.
mhm.
I mean, I don't necessarily get up and go, "Oh, yay, I get to go to work today." You know, I still have days where I
Mhm,
would rather be home doing something else. But bottom line, I do enjoy what I do, and
mhm.
I think a lot of people say that. A lot of people give that advice. Find something that you like to do. But that's really important. It really is important. It's important for sort of your quality of life.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, quality of life is really important.
Awesome. Thank you.
Are you thinking of
All
going
right.
to law school?
I actually was for a little while. I've debated it. So initially I was thinking like maybe litigation. I have family members who do litigation. It seems kind of interesting. Um, but I also like really love working with like people, and I really love being a student, and I really love like teaching stuff. So I kind of canter between the two where like I would also love to teach because like I'm really passionate about it. I'm actually getting my undergraduate in both political science and history. So like I'd love to be able to like teach history to kids. And I really love to be able to like further pursue looking into history. And although law school is still an option for right now, I'm thinking I can be a historian and get my PhD in that because like I could always go back to law school after. So I've just kind of tried to like leave that open for myself for like if this is what I want to do right now, I should go after it. And then if I change my mind in the future, and I want to be a lawyer, which I put a lot of thought into, I definitely still have that option available. So
Yeah,
just kind of what you
totally.
were saying, living in the moment with it.
Yeah, totally. My boss was a high school history teacher for a while before he
Mhm.
became a lawyer, and now he's
Yeah.
the county attorney. And so,
Yeah.
you. I think you'd be surprised when you go to law school, if you go to law school, to find
Mhm.
exactly how many people. It wasn't for me, but exactly how many people it's a second or even a third career.
Mhm.
So that's absolutely plausible and within the realm of possibility.
Mhm. Awesome.
Well, thank you. I don't really have anything else unless you have any other questions. I mean, I really am an open book, so
Yeah.
if there's anything, I feel free to ask.
No, I think that was all my questions. Thank you
Okay.
so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out of the day to do this interview with me.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem.